Hello everyone, we are finally continuing on with our NHL season previews, and of course we are talking about the Chicago Blackhawks today. Now before I start, please make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel. Hoping to do this as a full-time career one day and would appreciate the support. If not, no worries. Now let's talk about the Hawks. And Chicago is coming off one of their worst seasons since the 2005-6 season that landed them the third overall pick, that being captain Jonathan Tase. And this definitely feels odd to say because when I was a kid, even through when I was a teenager for most of my teenage years, the Hawks were, if not one of the better, one of the best teams in the league. They were not a team that was struggling to make the playoffs like when I was a kid. And they, of course, were proving that by winning 3 Stanley Cups in that time. They were a modern day dynasty, and the expectations for the franchise clearly have changed. So, what are some of the storylines for the team to follow for this season, and what should the team's expectations be? Well, undoubtedly, one of the biggest storylines for the Hawks this year will be what happens in the trade market. They're likely going to be shipping guys out, and a lot of players are expected to be flipped, but I think this is kind of where it gets interesting. You have Patrick Kane and Jonathan Tase that are the focal points of this. The two have combined to build an unimaginable legacy in the Windy City, which a few years ago, 20 years ago, if you would have said there's going to be 2 great players that come in and there's going to be a great team, they're going to win 3 Stanley Cups, people probably would have laughed considering the state of the team at the time where they didn't make the playoffs in 9 of 10 seasons. That, of course, changed with all of them. The problem is, though, both of the players do seem one out of this city if a rebuild is going to happen, and you're bound for a show if this is actually going to be the case and there is a trade. Now, things do get a little tricky, and here's why. For one, both players are in their 30s, so they might not be part of your team in the long-term future plans, and that's especially true since both players are unrestricted free agents after this season, meaning they can just leave you once the season is done, and that doesn't mix well for a team that would want to give up a reported $6.9 million they're supposed to make this season. I know their contracts are kind of wonky, but from what I could find, this season they're both supposed to make about $7 million a year. And it just feels a little risky, doesn't it? Guys that are UFAs, that are older, that are supposed to make $7 million a season, it just kind of, makes me shudder at the thought if you want to take that gamble. On the one hand, you'd be getting guys that are top of the line caliber players for a big market team, or they were at least at this point, and they have built a modern day dynasty with those 3 cups. But at the same time, you have to feel a little uncomfortable knowing that these guys could just take off. Now, take Kane, for instance. Yes, he's coming off of a 92-point season, but it seems like the Buffalo native already has a suitor in mind this upcoming season, or not this upcoming one, but the season after, and that is Buffalo. If you didn't know, it seems like the Sabres are kind of smitten with him. They are completely fine with letting another team try to get him this season because they feel pretty confident they could get him afterwards, which is crazy to think that in 2023, Patrick Kane could be a Buffalo Sabre through free agency. I don't know if he would go there or not. There's been talks about it before, but with the team having some younger players that look like they could be better for the future, maybe it happens, which is why you'd have to be a little bit curious to see what teams would trade for him this season. In regards to Jonathan Tase, it gets a little bit more muddy as there's not a team that's been talked about where he wants to go and where he would want to be a free agent afterwards. He is from Manitoba, so maybe he could be thinking Winnipeg to play with the Jets, but you really can't tell with him, which worries me. Again, you don't know what you're going to get with him. Regardless, though, I do think the Blackhawks' asking price is probably going to have to go down for these two, as it seems like they want multiple first-round picks for possibly one or the other player, and you have to consider age, money, contract status, etc., what they would and wouldn't do for these teams. Now, I am curious, though, because their championship doors are shut, and they have to go from one shiny thing to the next, so by doing so, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with these two in the market. This is, one of the things. You have to figure it out. But, of course, they can get some other things right as well, as they have other guys like Max Domi and other value adds that could help them out in the trade market to get future picks or players, which is a good thing. So, not only are you going to have Kane and Tase that are big parts of the storyline of trades, but of course the depth pieces they added that are on these 1-year deals that are fairly cheap, maybe even 2-year deals that are fairly cheap that they could get out of here in the deadline or before the deadline in general to add depth pieces if you're a contending team. So let's see if we get a fire sale this season. Now, another storyline to follow this season will be whether the new head coach for the team will be able to succeed. That is Luke Richardson, and he is going to be the 40th head coach in franchise history and comes over from Montreal after having spent the past 4 seasons in Quebec as a alternate or assistant head coach, I should say. And he actually was the former Habs bench boss to come in when Ducharme had the spicy cough, and he was the coach that upset Vegas in the 3rd round of that. So if you didn't know who he was, that is the guy from what I've read, and that is actually a really cool thing. Now he does have his hands full with this roster that has a lot of question marks after coming over from Montreal, which things have been really going well for them in the long term as they've had some good trades, stuff like that. Now he comes over from a team like that is kind of headed that direction, whereas the Hawks are starting that direction possibly. Some of my biggest questions in mind will be how he will utilize Seth Jones, who is signed to a long-term deal and had kind of a rough year to kick it off in Chicago, especially at the start of the year. You looked at how things were going, and they were not going well. On top of that, he will have to handle things in net, which is going to be a weird situation as Delia, Fleury, and Lankinen are all gone, and there's going to be a new phrase in between the pipes to stop the puck in net, and that's going to be, a weird situation. When you lose Marc-Andre Fleury, who a lot of people say is going to be Hall of Famer, Kevin Lankinen, who was a guy that filled in pretty well and had a good stretch with him, especially in his first year, and then Delia, who is kind of viewed as a possible backup for this future, at least at one point he was. That's going to be hard. How do you replace those guys when they are the 3 guys that you expected to be there? Not only that, I would be curious to see how he handles his lines as Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Strome are going, Kirby Dach as well, some of the bigger names there. And I'm not sure this would have been a job I would take on, considering the roster is a little less promising than I would, see on paper last year. But who knows, maybe Richardson is just the right guy to make the most out of these players. And holy cow, if they had a good year, he would definitely be getting Coach of the Year, because look at the roster. You lose 3 goalies, you lose 3 bigger name players, etc. It would just be insane. And outside of that, I'd like to see what he's able to do after having previous experience in the AHL. He was the AHL coach for Ottawa for 4 seasons, guided them to the playoffs twice, and that is good. Now, that is no NHL head coach experience, but it's nice to see he's got that underneath his belt to say, well, I've kind of done this before, not at this level, but I've done it, and that's good. His toughest challenge yet, though, will be what is going to be taken on in expectations. Jay Fresh, if you don't know who he is a guy that kind of puts in numbers, and his model puts out what they expect for the season. Richardson apparently is going to have a really hard time, as the Jay Fresh model is expecting Chicago to have a 64-point season, just 2 points ahead of the Arizona Coyotes, where they would finish 7th within the division. It's going to be tough, and I'm curious to see how this goes and that he gets a fair shake at things. And, he does have an opportunity with some young guys that could be features in this season. They're not stars by any means, or expected stars, but we're going to talk about them. That is the final storyline, as there are 4 players as of right now that are expected to play for this season, and they are part of this group that they're trying to develop, those being Boris Kachuk, Taylor Radish, Lucas Reichel, and Alex Vlasic. Now, you could argue there's more, and that is fine as well, but these players could help out the team generally, as some of them are seen as possible long-term future guys. Kachuk and Reddish are important for a few reasons, as you had them part of the Hagel trade, and you'd like to see them get a good return. If you're Chicago, they traded Hagel, who is a guy that scored multiple 20-goal seasons with them, and now you got these younger guys that might be able to fill in for you. And the Lightning, of course, saw something in them, so maybe that's good. For now, it seems like Taylor will have a better chance at getting an impact for his new team, as he saw a bigger spike in minutes once he went to the Hawks. But just imagine how good it would be for the team if both of these players were able to solidify themselves as depth pieces for the future, and the team clicked on that goal. Now, the other 2 players is Vlasic, who is a former 2nd-round pick. He saw 15 games of action last year, and while I'm not sure what the future holds for him in store for his career, I'd say they really could use him to fill in for a top 4 role. Why? They've got Jack Johnson, and it just, if you know anything about Johnson from an analytics perspective or a traditional perspective, this guy is not, I don't know if he's a bad guy. I haven't heard anything that would say he's a bad person, but he's not great at hockey. And at this point, he is projected to play a top 4 role for Chicago, which is giving me nightmares for them. If Vysak could come on and play some extra minutes, he is put on the third pairing as of right now, it would be such a big relief for them, and I hope for the best for both sides. Now, the other player, this is the one that I'm really excited for. I don't know how this one's going to go, but Reichel. He is a former first-round pick, was taken 17th overall in the 2020 draft, played 11 games last year, and had 1 assist in that span. He's expected to play in a top 6 role this season, which could be a good thing because it could either mean he gets great experience, a lot of playing time, and in general could play well. And on the flip side, it also means that it could be pretty rough, considering the fact that he had 1 assist in those 11 games. You don't know what you're going to expect. I think he had 21 shots, and of course, no goals in that time. Tough to say, but it's going to be a sink or swim situation as he's going to be given plenty of opportunity. Will he do well in that opportunity? Maybe at the start of the year if he's able to play with guys that are better than him, but if they get traded, I could expect the second half of the season to be kind of a struggle for him as well. All in all, 4 guys, Reddish, Kachuk, Vysak, and Reichel. If you are a Hawks fan, I think you should pay attention to them because they could be a part of the future. I don't know if all 4 will be, but I think one of the names should stick around, at least. So, having said all this, what should the team's expectations be for this season? Well, unfortunately, if you haven't figured it out by now, probably just try to develop younger players and get good deals at the deadline because this is reality for Chicago. In my opinion, Chicago is not in the position where they could even compete for the playoffs over the course of an 82-game season. And I think they're aware of that. I got a guy at work that I'm friends with. Hey, Steve, if you're watching this, hello. He, of course, is a guy that is a realist, but also kind of a homer where he roots for the home team. But I think even he understands that this team is probably not going to make the playoffs. I expect them to be way worse than I think he does. But we're at this point where, I don't know if you want to call it a rebuild, but by the end of this deadline, the Hawks are probably going to be in a rebuild, and I'd say that they would be lucky to finish better than 7th in the division this year. Will it actually happen? I don't know. Crazier things have happened. Maybe Kane and Tase just go on a splurge and they get to be this vintage of themselves. They get great goaltending. Seth Jones becomes, the true number 1 goalie that they wanted him to be, that he paid for, and then it all pans out. The young guys just fill in, and you have this whirlwind season. I don't expect that, and I don't think you should either. But let me know your expectations for Chicago down below in the comments, whether that be good or bad. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody, please stay safe, have a great night, and you go Valky, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.